Hello, and welcome to the Bible for Worship at St. Paul Lutheran Church on this sixth Sunday after Epiphany, when our Gospel reading is written in the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 5, verses 21 through 26. Jesus said, "You have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, 'You shall not murder,' and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, 'You fool,' you will be liable to the hell of fire." So when you're offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First, be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you're on the way to court, or your accuser may hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you will be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. The Gospel of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Here in these verses in Matthew 5, the body of the Sermon on the Mount opens up for us. The large 3-chapter-long teaching of Jesus that occupies Matthew 5 through 7. We've heard a prologue to this, if we've been reading Matthew, in chapter 5, verses 17 to 20, where Jesus says, "Don't think that I have come to abolish or do away with the Torah and the prophets. No, I have come to fulfill them, to make them real, to fill them more fully." For Matthew's community, it's clear Jesus is their rabbi. And just as Moses did for biblical Israel in leading them and teaching them and trying to help them understand what it would be to fill out God's commandments for Israel's life as God's people, so here Matthew presents Jesus offering that same leadership to Matthew's community. And yes, indeed, it turns out lifestyle matters. After all, just before that prologue, Jesus has said in this Sermon on the Mount, "You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world." Chapter 5, verses 13, and then 14 through 16. You're the light of the world, echoing what God has said to Israel through the prophet Isaiah, chapter 42:6, chapter 49:6, chapter 60, verse 3 of the prophet Isaiah, where God calls Israel to be a light to the nations. This is what God's people do in Israel and in the Jesus community for whom Matthew writes. And if you're going to be a light to the world, then your lifestyle, the way you live, makes a difference. And so we have, you might call him Rabbi Jesus, the title of a book by Professor Bruce Chilton, if you will. You have Jesus teaching in this style. You have heard that it was said, and I say to you. Notice my subtle shift there from the way the New Revised Standard translates it. Because while these 6 teachings that begin with the one we're looking at today have been called the antitheses, you have heard, but I say to you. Really, in many ways, that is too strong. How different does it sound if Jesus says, "You've heard that it was said, and I say to you," or "You've heard that it was said, now I say to you." It's much more a sense of building on what the ancients heard, on what is written in the Torah, on what scripture has in it. It's extending the implications the way any good teacher will. Here's the principle, here's what you've been taught, and let me help you understand what some of the implications and applications of that might be. And especially we see in this one, it's the implications in the connection of human relations and our relationship with God. Let's take a look at how that works. In verse 21, you've heard that it said, if you murder, you will be liable to judgment. In the Torah, that's judgment by the courts in biblical Israel. But Jesus goes on to say that you'll also be liable for judgment if you speak ill of a brother or sister. And then finally, if you call someone fool, moron, literally in the Greek, you will be liable to the hell of fire, or the fire of hell, to this place, Gehenna, which was understood to be punishment in the life to come, modeled on a garbage dump outside Jerusalem, where the fires in the garbage pit never went out. Well, it moves, Jesus says, the sense of the urgency of living a lifestyle worthy of God's people from simply don't get caught or people will judge you, to this is about how you stand before God, how you live before God. Or in the second section here, if you're about to give your gift at the altar, you're about to make a gift to God, and you realize that a brother or a sister has something against you. It's not that you have something against them. That's the first case, if you speak ill of them or you think they're an idiot. No, this is if they have something against you. Go and be reconciled with them. Because this gift at the altar to God, what can it mean that you somehow are in good relationship with God if you can't sustain good relationships with others of God's people? The implications here are what are being drawn out. Or finally, in the metaphor of verses 25 and 26 at the end of the passage, make peace quickly with your accuser on the way to court. Because if you don't, look at the implications. Your accuser hands you to the judge, who hands you to the jailer. You end up thrown in jail. And in some jails in the Roman Empire, you never got out because you couldn't pay the last penny. As so many rabbis did in his day and have through the centuries and still do today in the Jewish community, so Jesus and Matthew do here. They remind us it's far too easy to take our faith lightly. To believe on the one hand, hey, I'm good with God. God's told me that. So everything goes once I know that. And God will just take care of it. Or, on the other hand, I'll get the basics. Tell me what the basics are. I'll handle those. When God signs off on those, we're good. Neither of those takes faith seriously and builds a lasting relationship with God and with God's people. And what Jesus and Matthew and so many rabbis have done for so many centuries is to say that faith and life in God claims all of us. All of us. Will we ever get it all right? Of course not. Judaism knows that and has ways to deal with it. Christianity knows that and has ways to deal with it. But that doesn't lessen the claim. Faith and life with God claims all of us. So, Jesus says, Matthew passes on to his community and to us, go all in for God who goes all in for us. God bless.